All right, hello everybody. I thought it would be fun to go through one of my Terry Pratchett books again. Haven't reviewed this one yet. The last one I reviewed, I believe, was Thief of Time, but I think I've mentioned this a couple of times, either here or on the Wordy Pair podcast. Reaper Man is, I think it's like the 11th book in the Discworld series, something like that. It came out in 1991. It's way earlier than the than Thief of Time, which I think is number 26, way later. And yeah, but like Thief of Time, it also has an appearance from the Auditors, who we really liked, and at least I did really liked in Thief of Time. So just to minor plot description without too many spoilers. The driving force behind this book is that the Auditors have decided that Death is too human, and so they have decided to replace him. And so the story begins with Death basically being given a lifetimer, which he's never had before, and so he's like, well, you giving me this means that I guess I'm out of a job, so I guess I'm going to go, kind of live the time that I have, and so that's kind of one major thread of our story. Thread number 2 is kind of coalesces around a wizard from the universe, from Unseen University, who is named Wendell Poons, and he is supposed to die, but he does not. And so he ends up in this kind of weird state where he's not quite dead and not quite alive, and not actually undead either in any meaningful sense of the term, right? He basically is a disembodied spirit that reoccupies his own body and kind of controls it like a marionette, and it's very funny, and he gains a lot of power by doing that because he no longer is limited by the fact that he's kind of stuck in a brain or in a body. He's not technically attached anymore. This is a really fun book. I like this one a lot. I read it pretty frequently. When I looked at I'm not nearly as huge a Terry Pratchett fan as Justin is, the guy that I do the Wordy Pair podcast with, but some of that fanness has rubbed off on me, and so I do have a few Terry Pratchett books here and there. Not a lot of them, but I do enjoy them when I get a chance to read them. I kind of got into things very, very late in the game for being a Terry Pratchett fan, unfortunately. So Death has quit, or been basically told that your services are no longer needed. And of course, this doesn't mean that everything in the world stops dying. What it does mean is that now there's kind of this overflow of life force that needs to find outlets for its forceness. And so there's a lot of plot elements that are related to that. Without spoiling too much, it's pretty obvious that this is what's happening from the beginning, but the actual specifics of the results are kind of fun, and so I'll leave those unspoiled. Death goes off, and he decides to go work in a village as like a farmer. He basically is like, well, I'm really good with a scythe, so I guess I'll go harvest crops. So he goes to a little town. He finds like an old spinster named Miss Flitworth, and he goes to work for her on her farm and kind of learns a little bit about being human. Ironically, the Auditors kicking Death out of his position for being too human results in him becoming even more human and even more sympathetic to humans in a lot of ways. Of course, him not actually taking care of all these dying things, because Death is not just, at the start of this book, Death is not just the death of humans, he's the death of everything, with one exception. And or at least he's the death of Discworld, I guess, right? And so like he's responsible for dealing with the petering out life force of every life form on Discworld. And when he's not around to deal with that anymore, like I said, a bunch of fun stuff happens. I guess fun from our perspective, highly dangerous and annoying, and sometimes highly destructive from the perspective of people actually in the book. So one thread of the story is Death, and we get to see him kind of develop as a character a little bit more than he had in the past. One thread of characters is Wendell Poons, and he actually kind of jumps into two different threads. There's one thread with a bunch of like kind of misfit monsters, basically. It's supposed to be it's called what's it called exactly? The Fresh Start Club. And it's basically something that Reg Shu, who is a zombie, started to kind of get people to, he wants rights for the dead, basically. Now, unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of actual dead people in this club. We have the Count and Countess Not Faruto. They are people who suddenly inherited a vampiric mansion or vampiric castle. We have Schleppel the Bogeyman. We have Lupine. We have a bunch of these characters. There's a banshee named something unpronounceable. And so there's that thread that Windlepoons kind of joins this club and gets together with these characters, and they kind of wander around trying to figure out what the heck's going on. Then Windle is also part of a second thread, and that thread is the Wizards of Unseen University. Specifically, a bunch of them appear, but the ones who have the most screen time, so to speak, are the Arch-Chancellor, the Bursar, the Librarian, and the Dean, and Windle, of course. So they kind of have their own effort to figure out what the hell is going on, and of course, as you might expect, hilarity ensues. I enjoy the Wizards as characters, and kind of the way that they react to things, I think, is always very fun. We get a lot of really good scenes without spoiling too much. We get a scene of sharpening a scythe, which I think is very memorable to me. For some reason, I find this chunk of the story very memorable and interesting. We have let's see, what else? We have Mrs. Cake, who is like she's a spiritualist or something like that, and she is stated to be kind of like the bane of the existence of every religion on the Discworld, because she's so because she kind of actually has the answers, where all the religions are kind of reliant on kind of hiding the answers from people in one way or another, and so she's kind of always on their cases, and they're all terrified of her. She has a daughter named Ludmilla, who is a woman 3 weeks out of the year and a wolf woman 1 week out of the year. And then we have one of the members of the Fresh Start Club is Lupine, and he's a wolf 3 weeks out of the year and a wolf man 1 week out of the year. There's some fun there. We have a great scene where the patrician calls all the wizards and calls all the priests to try to figure out what is going on with the world and all this crazy stuff happening. And there's a very fun scene there. I love that one as well. That's very memorable. We have a extended action scene near the end of the book in which we refer to nothing so much as the movie Aliens, believe it or not. And I actually had to go and look, because I was like, well, when was this book written? And when was the movie Aliens? Right? And so this book, as I mentioned before, 1991, the movie Aliens, 1986. So, either Terry Pratchett had just seen the movie and was like, oh, this is really cool, I'm going to put this in my book, or he had been working on this for a long time, and it just so happened that there was a sizable gap between the movie and the book. There's a couple other references. There's one that I think might be a reference to one of the Rambo movies. Very short reference. The extended reference is Aliens. And then there's one other moderate reference. That's to something that you might not expect, and that's the folklore hero John Henry. He was like a railroad drill hammerer guy. So there's a scene that refers to that. This book is written in kind of a very block style. Like, there's no chapter breaks at all. Like, there's a few points where there's like some asterisks, but like you just go from one character group to another character group, back to another character group, back to a different character group, and there's like an extra carriage return as a division between them. And so, like, once you sit down with this book, you kind of just finish it, or you have to look really hard for a place to stop. I remember I was reading it the night before last, and I was like, where's I'm like, okay, it's it's midnight. I got to get to bed, and I'm like, I just got to find a good place to stop. And I'm just a click, and finally I'm like, oh, it's 20 minutes later. I'm just gonna stop here and put a bookmark in here because there's no good like breathing spots. The book just kind of freight trains forward over time until it hits a very fun and funny climax, and then falling action and loose ends tied up. The book is pretty standard Pratchett in that it is full of constant puns and quips. The narrator is very much a kind of like British documentary style kind of character in a sense, where humorous British documentary character in a sense, where there's always something happening and there's always good descriptions, and then the narrator himself will always have a little quip to add to it, which are frequently fun, often funny, and sometimes actually have like a neat little philosophical point in there as well. We get the appearance, I believe the first appearance of the death of rats in this book as well. The death of rats becomes a recurring character later on. I mean, it's just a really fun book, and I would only be spoiling things if I started describing things to you. So I think my goal here is just to say, if you are looking for a fun book that deals with some of the colorful characters in the Discworld, in the early signs that start part of the Discworld, a book that kind of just goes off on its own kind of freight train move and goes from character group to character group without warning, you will like Reaper Man. It's a very fun book. If you like the character of Death, this is a great part of his saga. If you like the Wizards, you will love this because they just have so much screen time, so to speak, and you get to see all of their little like quirks and like character traits. Basically, we get for instance, we get the Arch Chancellor, and the Arch Chancellor is basically a kind of like a big fat fox hunting kind of guy. Like if you get that image in your head, and and there's a point in the story, which I don't think this is really spoiling anything, but right, I mentioned that there's all this life force that's kind of popping around, and the Arch Chancellor is particularly foul-mouthed, and so what ends up happening is that every time he curses, the curse turns into a like a living creature that floats around, and there's some fun descriptions there. Like, some fun ideas there, and of course it creates some problems for the rest of the wizards as they're trying to accomplish their goals in that particular part of the story. There's one part in this story that I think is kind of interesting where, how much of this do I want to spoil? Maybe I don't want to spoil this. I ended up spoiling too much there as I was going on about it, so I just cut that part out. But yeah, this is a fun story. It's worth reading if you like Terry Pratchett at all. If you like, if you have a good sense for that British kind of humor, you'll enjoy this. If you like, a lot of puns and quips, you'll like this. Pratchett is always fun to read, so I just felt like rereading this and talking about it a little bit. As you can see, this is a pretty short review, because again, I don't want to spoil any of Pratchett's cute little fun surprises. So that's what I've got for today. Oh, no, you know what? I'm going to mention one more thing. There's a character named One Man Bucket, and his conclusion joke is one of the is one of my favorite. It's just a straight joke in the book. And Pratchett doesn't do straight up, setup payoff jokes very often. But this is one where like it's just a perfect setup and a perfect payoff, and you've been wondering this the whole story. And it's just a really, really well done, well timed, well set up joke, and yeah, you'll like that too. I think that's all I want to talk about with this book. I already had to make a cut where I was spoiling too much. So just the Pratchett books are interesting because there's this long Discworld series. I think it's 45 books, which is crazy, but like, you don't really need to read them in any particular order. Even though there is a bit of like a time element throughout the stories as they go on, characters move from here to there. You never really have to worry too much about that in an individual book, right? If it's going to happen during the book, then it happens during the book and it's justified. You never have to be like, oh, this guy was here in a previous book that I read, and now I don't know why he's over here, and this is a big deal. It's always pretty well explained. Characters are introduced well. And of course, everything is very funny and fun to read. So yeah, I'm going to stop there. I'm just going to say, go read Oh, I got to get my fingers in the right place. Go read Reaper Man. It is super fun. It is a really good example of Terry Pratchett, kind of old school Terry Pratchett at his best. Fantastic story, fantastic characters, lots and lots of characters going on. This is a dense book. I mean, like it's a chunker for, you know, what you would imagine. You would look at this and you'd be like, 180 pages. Like, no, it's almost 350, or it's a little over 350. So, like, yeah, good read, solid fun, Pratchett at his best, and that's what I've got. So, as always, thanks for watching, thanks for listening. I will put a link in the description for a copy of Reaper Man if you want to go look for one. And yeah, that's all I've got for today. And, you know, if you like what I'm doing with the channel, you know what to do. Have a good one.